From Deloitte Tax, welcome to the Tax News and Views podcast. In this series, we talk to specialists from Deloitte about the latest business issues and developments. I'm Carrie Falkenhayn, your host for Tax News and Views, and joining me today for a special edition podcast to provide the latest update on the potential for tax legislation is John Traub from Deloitte's Tax Policy Group. I'm sure listeners are familiar with John's insights on policy matters from prior podcasts. So, John, we've been anticipating some sort of legislation coming out of Congress that could include tax law changes for some time now. But we had news reports that Senator Manchin has walked away from efforts to construct a Build Back Better reconciliation package. So is it really dead? And what's going to happen to push things from this point?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a weird situation, Carrie. We are talking on Friday morning, July 15th, and late last night, news reports broke that Senator Manchin had told Senator Schumer he was not prepared to vote for a big climate package paid for with tax increases on individuals and corporations. This morning, however, I should note that Senator Manchin said, well, I just said I wasn't prepared to vote for it in August. Maybe we can look at it in September. And the reconciliation instructions don't actually expire until September 30th. But in conversations I've had with Senate Democratic staff, they're very skeptical that this can be reconstituted in September in time to meet reconciliation instructions. So I think Senate Democratic leadership are sort of saying the big tax and climate and spending package is done. Maybe we can get agreement on a smaller package that deals with some healthcare items, like allowing Medicare to negotiate prescription drug costs and preventing a potential large increase in insurance premiums for people who buy coverage through the Affordable Care Act exchanges. But, you know, it's been a series of topsy-turvy twists and turns along the way, Carrie, and I guess we can always expect, you know, one more before it's all said and done.
So what got us to this point, John?
Well, you know, if you remember, the House last year passed a very big tax and spending package called Build Back Better, and Senator Manchin in December said, I'm not comfortable with it. It's too big. Inflation is too much. I want to scale it back. I want to fix some of the structure around it. And he and Senator Schumer had been engaged in some on-again, off-again discussions really for almost all of calendar year 2022. And in the last 2 weeks, we got this increasing sense of optimism from the Senator Schumer team that they were getting close to a deal. And then we saw Wednesday's inflation print came out at 9.1%. And I think that was, for Senator Manchin, the straw that broke his back. And I think caused him to sort of say, I can't vote for this now. And again, he's in theory left the door open to doing it later, but the later is a pretty small window given when reconciliation instructions expire.
So it sounds like there could be another chapter in this before the reconciliation expires at the end of September.
I mean, I guess I'd call to mind, you know, like a really bad slasher horror movie where you think the bad guy's finally been killed and he rises one more time to terrorize the sports team or the summer camp before the theater lights finally come up. So until we actually cross into October 1st and the reconciliation instructions expire, there's always a possibility that what we're seeing right now is a negotiating tool by both sides to try to exert leverage in advance of a last-ditch effort to put them together. I don't think that's the case, but it's certainly not outside the realm of possibility.
Got it. And there's another bill, right, pending around competitiveness with China. Is that likely to carry some tax items?
There's been a great deal of hope that it could carry two different tax items. One would be a new set of tax incentives to encourage construction of chip fabrication facilities in the U.S., and that seems possible. There's also been this lingering hope that if Build Back Better didn't advance, that they could use the China competition bill to include a retroactive delay of the 174 R&D rules that became effective on January 1 of this year. That to me seems very unlikely. I should say, not to make people panic too much, I do think Congress will deal with the 174 rules, but probably not in the China bill, but probably closer to the end of the calendar year.
And what about some of the other tax items that we've been talking about, like extenders and global minimum tax? What do you think will happen with those?
Yeah, I mean, let me put this in two different buckets. Global minimum tax is interesting because obviously we've seen in recent weeks, first Poland and then Hungary decide they weren't comfortable with the framework that the EU needs unanimity on. But it certainly appears at this point, absent a last-minute change of direction, that the U.S. will not enact rules to make guilty into a Pillar 2 compliant regime, which has long-term consequences for U.S. multinationals in the global community. And I know you've had Bob Stack on this podcast in the past, and you may want to get him on again to talk about what this means going forward and what the rest of the world may do in response to the U.S. failing to make the guilty changes. I think there's some really interesting dynamics there. And then there's a whole series of other tax items could see Congress attack in a lame duck post-election session. Those include things like tax incentives for renewables. I mentioned 174. There's the switch under 163J from EBITDA to EBIT. There's retirement security incentives. And all of those we think are items that Congress could take up in a session between the time of the election and the end of calendar year 2022.
So I guess we will certainly be talking again then, it sounds like. Well, thank you for that update. And I look forward to our next discussion. If people would like more information, you can subscribe to the email version of Tax News and Views by going to Deloitte.com. You can also connect with John directly via LinkedIn. And I hope you tune in here for future policy editions. In the meantime, thank you for joining us and listening in, and be well, everyone.